Last shows of the tour, and I got like the worst food poisoning and just like puking my brains out. Of course, whatever my body was fighting off totally like made its way in and was just like fucked for the last like 2 shows of tour.
Worst gig ever with your host Geoff Garlock on Revolver. Oh.
Don't get sick on tour. It's terrible. Hi, everybody. This is Geoff Garlock. Welcome to Worst Gig Ever on Revolver. This is the podcast where we talk to musicians about how terrible it is to be in a band, how awful it is to be a musician. Why would we choose this life? Well, because you get fun stories out of it. And today is no exception. We have Dave from Revocation, and he has some fantastic stories. He's got some sickness. He never stops being sick, is how I'm coming out of this. And it's terrible to be sick when you're not in your own comfy bed. So I want you to keep on listening and enjoy the fact that you are home and not in a van currently. And if you like this episode, go listen to our other episodes. We got a whole bunch of other episodes. And we've got past episodes on worstgigevertumblr.com. But now, listen to Dave from Revocation. Their new record is
The Outer Ones.
And it comes out when?
September 28th.
You heard it here first. No, you didn't. This is an exclusive. Worst gig ever. I always start the podcast with just kind of talking about a worst gig. Whatever it is to you. Could be a small one, could be a big one, could be a tour, could be a job. What do you got?
For me, it involved Pneumonia
on
tour. So I was out, this was years ago, with Forbidden. At some point I picked up, I guess would be considered walking pneumonia. Mm-hmm. So just sort of coughing constantly, super congested in my chest, and just kind of generally felt like shit.
Sure.
I got tattooed on that tour, which probably didn't help my body's immune system. And then right around we were going out to the West Coast, I really sort of started to take a nosedive. I remember I was in Arizona, went to like an ER out there, or some kind of like urgent care clinic. They totally misdiagnosed me. They were like, "Oh, you have a sinus infection." I don't know if they did any testing or whatever.
Right.
But they're like, "Yeah, okay, it's this. Like, take these antibiotics," which of course didn't work for pneumonia.
Right.
And probably only helped the pneumonia.
Exacerbated it. Yep.
Yeah. So I think maybe like for the day or two afterwards, maybe placebo effect was kicking in. I felt like maybe I was getting better. Like,
doing it. This is gonna get better.
Antibiotics. Modern medicine,
right.
Great. And then when we were coming back east, I was in like Texas or something like that, and I'm like, I'm dying. I don't know, like these antibiotics are not working at all.
Right.
What is happening? I need to go to a hospital. I ended up in the ER like a couple more times, and they were like, yeah, you had walking pneumonia. It's now like full blown pneumonia. It's all up in your lungs.
Right.
Like this is like serious. Like do not keep playing shows.
Yeah.
So of course I kept playing shows.
How many more shows did you have at this point?
We had a few more. We ended up canceling the last couple, but I distinctly remember we were in, what date was it? I think it was somewhere in Louisiana. I don't know if it was Baton Rouge or just maybe outside of New Orleans or something like that. We were playing with Goat Whore, and it was this small club, and it was hot as fuck in there. And I remember just trying to muster the strength. This was like at the height of how bad it was. Like I couldn't eat. I totally lost my sense of taste and smell. So I was just trying to choke down. And I'm like a big foodie. I used to do a food blog, so like not being able to eat was like that. I was like, oh my god, like I'm gonna just become vegan or something like that. Like I can't taste anything. Like what is going on? So I'm just like choking down a power bar and like take 2 steps, and like literally I had enough energy to like walk a couple steps, and then I would just kind of collapse on the ground.
Right.
So needless to say, it wasn't the best gig. It was actually the worst gig ever. I thought I was going to die, and then shortly after that, I wound up in the ER again, and they were like, "Yeah, you're done. Like we're not even going to let you leave," because I don't think normal antibiotics would have worked at that point.
Right.
I had to be hooked up to a drip.
Jesus
so
Christ.
I remember just being like on tour, in an ER, watching some Will Smith movie on TV in like a crazy fever dream.
Probably Hancock.
Yeah, maybe. I don't even know. While the antibiotics slowly dripped into me. And then, of course, it's not like you wake up the next day like feeling like 100%.
No.
You still feel terrible. But we managed to just get back home, and I think I just stayed in bed for like a week straight and was brushing my teeth, and I could taste mint all of a sudden. I was like, oh my God, it's
not bad.
Right. So that was my
That seems terrible.
It was the worst. It wasn't just worst gig ever. It was probably the worst 2-week span of my life, and it really almost made me think about quitting music, because if you've ever been super duper sick, it sucks. But at least you're home in the comfort of your own bed or whatever. You can kind of bundle up and just deal with it. This was new city every day. We're in weird hotels and and it was also in the early stages of the band, so we weren't really making any money. Any hotel that we were going to get was
cuts right in.
Right, cuts right in. It was a major expense, and there's also the pressure on me because I have to.
Well, because especially at that point, like you're saying, every cent counts.
Right.
And so then each time you're in an ER, you've got that pressure in your brain of just I'm also costing us.
Right.
This is probably going to cost something.
Right.
And it really ends up being it's we would always end up on tour doing math of just all right, if nothing bad happens, we'll come home with $50 each. And then one blown tire goes. But in this case, it's just this is going to just fuck up the numbers.
Oh, yeah.
Which should be the least of your issues that, that you need to get healthy. But, I think it also is hard where when you're on tour, even if you're not sick, you feel trapped a lot of times. You're in a tin can, moving from city to city.
Moving fast.
Moving very fast.
Yeah.
And you're not escaping the people you're with. You have to be with them. And then on top of it, you've got that kind of sickness. How did they step up to the plate? Were they...
Yeah, my bandmates were supportive for sure. They knew I wasn't faking it, right? And I think trip to the ER was also proof positive just how fucked up I was. But yeah,
so if it wasn't that, then you're super hypochondriac, and then you have different issues.
Right, and that's a whole other story. But
right.
Yeah, they on the way back they did all the driving because it's if I drive back, we're all in danger because I don't know what's gonna.
Right.
I can't even stay awake. I was just in the back seat shivering. So
God.
Yeah, not only worst gig ever, but just worst.
How did you deal with the actual playing? Did you have enough adrenaline that could push through?
Yeah, it just kind of kicked in. That last show in Louisiana, I wasn't singing at all. But somehow, I don't know, we just kind of managed the strength to persevere. I guess the energy of the crowd or adrenaline. I mean, the human body is miraculous in a lot of ways. It can just kind of operate when it comes down to brass tacks. But yeah, it was a shitty time.
I mean, it seems terrible. I mean, in there too, though, you mentioned, and this is on a completely different topic. You mentioned you're into food.
Mm-hmm.
So what?
I've also gotten horrible food poisoning on tour too.
Oh, you have?
Oh my God!
Tell me more, my good friend.
Oh God! That's happened to me a few times on this last tour we did with cattle decapitation.
Mm-hmm.
It was. I made it the whole way through, totally fine, felt good, and there was I think there was there was something going around.
Right.
There was bronchitis. I think someone else had gotten some kind of stomach thing, but it was from food poisoning. But like you were saying, you're in a tin can. You're in this weird petri dish.
Yep.
If someone's sick, everyone's gonna get sick. And I remember distinctly everyone in the band getting a cough or a cold, and I managed to totally dodge it.
Right.
And we were in St. Louis, one of the last shows of the tour, and I got the worst food poisoning. And just puking my brains out. Of course, whatever my body was fighting off totally made its way in. I got horrible bronchitis and was just fucked for the last 2 shows of tour. I think I actually lost. That was another really crappy show for me. That was this New Jersey Death Fest was the last show of this 7.5 week long,
which is a long fucking
such
tour.
a long time. We all just wanted to be home at that point. The show
and
was
you were
fun.
ending on a death fest.
And we were ending on a death fest, yeah. And I totally lost my voice on stage. That really sucked. I mean, I could keep going.
Please.
I got another really good one.
It sounds like they're just going to keep rolling.
Yeah.
There's nothing but garbage.
I had this one really bummed me out because I've never been to Venice before, and no tours ever go to Venice.
Right.
And we didn't have a show there, but it just so happened that we had a day off. This was when we were out with Cannibal Corpse. We were sharing a bus. Everything was rad. And I don't know where I picked it up, but I got some just death poison stomach bug. And I remember, like, waking up. We were at the hotel, like, went to the bathroom. Like, I felt like I was going to pass up. My color was just gone. I'm like, I need to get a hotel room. And, like, because I knew we were going to be posted up there. And, like, everyone's out, like, on, like, gondola rides, like, eating, like, fresh calamari and stuff like that. And I'm like,
we're living the life!
Right. Like, we're never going to go to Venice ever again. This is such a one-off.
Yeah.
And, like, I'm just in bed, like, just, like, puking and shitting my brains out, just feeling like death.
Right.
And the next day was a little bit better, but not by much. I could at least get on stage. So
That's it. That also speaks to some, like, especially in European tours for me, like, there's that pressure of, like, well, we got to try to do something. Like, we might never be here again.
Right.
And then, like, I remember distinctly, and it wasn't a sickness, it was just being sick of fucking everyone.
Right.
Like, we went to Stonehenge, and I just refused to go to Stonehenge.
Oh, bummer.
I was just like, I didn't want to look at anyone in my band. I didn't want to look at anyone in Das Oath, I think we were on tour with at that point. And I was just like, I'm not paying $10. Like, it was just like, for no reason. I had the money, and I sat in a field, like, staring at everyone, and literally the first thing that came out of his mouth was like, that was the coolest thing we've ever done. And I was like, well, I guess I just have life regrets now. But that is, you end up, like, trying, like, you know, it is extra hard when you're, like, you get incapacitated in these things, but you're like, when am I going to be in Venice again? Like,
Right.
But on the other hand, too, just remember, not like I probably have brought this up before when we went to Germany once. We were on tour, and I was just like, we got to do something, because we never did anything. We would, like, that's the other part of tour. You don't, you know, that often doesn't occur. It's like, if you have the chance to do something, you have to grab it.
Right.
So most of the time you're in the van. Like, you're in the van or the bus.
Yep.
You're kind of at a venue that looks like any other venue. They just have different soda. And so, like, all of a sudden we're like, we need to do a tourist thing. And we went to a concentration camp because it was the only thing that we could find that was touristy.
Right.
And immediately we're just like, worst idea. Like, this was not fun.
Yeah, it's definitely not. I went to Dachau, and it's certainly...
It was a sobering day.
Yeah, very sobering. But it's also a piece of history that's, I think...
I was very glad I went to that to say, like, I can understand it now better. But at the same time, when I came back and told my now wife, like, she was like, "What did you do besides touring?" I was like, "Really, one thing."
Right. Yeah.
And it's creepy.
That's not fun.
When you kind of boil it down.
Right. For sure.
What those food poisonings? Do you think it was from food that you had, or like some weird food, or just normal bullshit, fast food?
I don't even remember. I mean, I'm a pretty adventurous eater,
right?
So buyer beware, obviously. Sometimes when you're trying different stuff, but it could have been just bad luck. It could have been a stomach virus. It could have been any number of things. Luckily, like, I've got, like, a good immune system, so, like, if it hits me, like, within, let's say, 48 hours, I'm, like, back to normal. The pneumonia thing was just a crazy
a nightmare.
But the food poisoning thing, like, I've gotten it before. I'm sure I'll probably get it again. Like, eat this weird thing. Like, hell yes.
There's always going to be a weird thing to eat.
And then I'm paying the price. But normally, 99% of the time you're fine, and it's just that 1%. It's just that we tour so much.
Sure.
It's just so consistently that it's bound to happen here or there where you get. What is
your go-to for food on tour? Like, do you have, like, kind of a standard, like, if you're searching out in America, anywhere really? But
I think it depends on, like, the region I'm in. Sometimes, like, if you're in, like, SoCal, like, you want to, like, hit up some, like, Mexican food, or, like, certain parts of Texas, like, obviously barbecue or Tex-Mex.
Right.
But a lot of times I'm just kind of, like, on, like, different apps. Like, I get this app called Chef's Feed, which is cool if you're, like, in a major city. It won't work if you're just, like, in the middle of nowhere. But it's cool because it's like Yelp, but written by chefs. Like, sometimes Yelp is just
Crazy people.
Crazy people,
Yep.
yeah. Or like a place is actually good, and people are like,
Yeah.
the waiter was mean, 1 star. Or like
Right.
the place is
Did not like the napkin.
right.
Get out of
right.
here. Like,
Or
all
the
right.
place is like terrible, and like people love it. It's like this
Right.
Denny's is amazing.
Yeah.
So
You won't believe the moon's over my hammy.
right,
here.
right. The moon's over Miami there. Wow. But yeah, so I'll just kind of go on that and see if there's like anything in my general vicinity. Because yeah, it's chefs that say like, okay, like go to this place and not only go here, but go here and get this specific dish.
Right,
So
right.
it's kind of cool. I'll be like, oh, cool. There's like I didn't know like Chinatown was around the corner
Sure.
from me at this venue, and like you just got to do a little bit of searching out. But for me, I've got as we were saying, a pretty broad taste, right?
Right.
So like I'm down for anything as long as it's good.
Do you
but
use...
pho maybe is like one that's kind of generally like everyone likes because it's
Sure.
like it's healthy and it's light, but it also kind of feels hearty when you're eating it.
Mm-hmm. So I think even with that, like, so when you're out on tour, because you're out on tour a lot, do you use the meals as a break from each other, or are you a unified force often? Or do you break into factions?
I break off the most for sure.
Right.
I love dining out and spending time with my dudes, but for me, I can totally go out and like eat by myself and like not feel weird being like table
Right.
for one, please. Like
Sure.
I'm stoked. I'm like hell
Right.
yeah. I'm like be on my phone, whatever. I
Yeah.
don't really care. And I think it is good to get some alone time. Everyone's got their own thing where they do that. Like
Right.
like Brett will go out and like skateboard.
Right.
I'm not like jogging behind him like
Sure.
you want to chat, bud? He'd probably just like
Right.
just start. You don't pedal on a skateboard, right?
Yeah,
What
you
the
do
hell?
something
Push
with your
What?
foot.
I don't know.
Yeah.
You'd run away from me is what I'm
Yes, exactly.
saying. Dan has like he's got his computer. He's like a big like video game.
Right.
Ash has his own sort of meditation rituals
Right.
or whatever before he gets on stage. So for me, that's one bit of escapism. I also like play a lot of guitar on tour,
Right.
so that would be like another bit of alone time.
Sure.
I'll just like post up with my amp somewhere in some corner of the green room, or sometimes outside if it's nice out, and just sort of zone out, and that's my meditation and my reset button. But
Right.
yeah, I enjoy it. But we've also had so many great bonding moments, like sharing a meal together, like clowning around. But if I've got like my mind set on something, like there's like a crazy whatever restaurant around the corner. If everyone else is like, but we want this, I'm like, all right, screw you guys.
Right.
Like, have fun.
Yeah.
I want to go do my thing, and
Sure.
we'll link up the
Well,
other
'cause-
23 hours.
Right,
of the day
exactly.
that I see
Well,
you.
because that's the thing, too, is eventually, like, you run out of things to talk about.
We always
Like-
have something to talk about.
Well, that's good.
We keep the conversation going. Like the camaraderie in the band is really good. We're just always clowning, goofing around.
Right. Do you have, this is something that comes up with that, do you have any van rules? Like, do you have any, like, this person controls the music, then don't do, this with pissing in bottles?
We definitely piss in bottles.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It keeps coming up. I've been touring since I was
really?
fucking like 18.
Oh, wow.
I'm going to be 40. I've never pissed in a bottle.
Oh yeah, you get like in our van like kind of shamed if you don't. It's like, dude, what the hell? Just piss in the bottle.
I think it'd be shamed if it did. I don't get it. I can't wrap my brain around it. There are
It's-
bathrooms everywhere.
But when you're cruising sometimes, or it's like a night drive and you're just like going.
Yeah.
I mean, like if I'm if you're the driver,
Sure.
and you have to pee, then like sure, but
Piss
like
break.
piss break. But if like everyone else is, if you're cruising and it's like a night drive and one guy's got to pee, then the next guy. I mean, look, if some people like can't pee in bottles, and I like totally respect that. You get pee shy. Or
I'm
whatever.
glad you respect
It's
me.
hard. It's hard. Sometimes I can't go. It's a bumpy ride. It can be difficult, especially when there's like so many guys around you and
Sure.
stuff like that. But we've definitely like pulled over and they're like on like a long drive and like also just sort of pure laziness, and you kind of like
Yeah.
no one really wants to do it, but there'll be like 37 piss bottles in the van sometimes when you're like, oh my god, like there are so many piss bottles.
No,
This is
thank you.
outrageous. And then like, so rule number 1, tighten the fucking
Yes, that's
cap
definitely. I agree with you on that
on the
one.
piss bottle.
As a non-piss bottle person,
for
definitely tighten
sure,
that cap.
because there's been some incidents. There's actually been some unfortunate piss drinking incidents.
Oh, fucking hell.
When people have left
That Gatorade
bottles.
looks real.
Or just like you're driving and like there's the water and then there's the piss.
Yeah.
Someone was smart enough to put a piss bottle. It's never happened to me.
Sure.
And I won't name names, but there's been there's been instances. There may have been even been an instance where someone tried to spit it out the rolled up window. It's like, and then it's just like a horrible.
It's like a double whammy of piss.
Yeah. So there's that.
It's like a Watain show.
Right? Yeah, it's like Watain with piss. That's the tagline.
Revocation. We're like Watain, but with piss.
Yeah, good stuff.
So no pee, so tighten the pee bottles.
Tighten the pee bottle caps.
Yep.
What else? Oh, no shoes in the back bed area. So we have like 2 benches that we take out and just sort of slide a mattress in. So the way our van is set up is there's the obviously the driver's seat, passenger seat, and then 2 bench rows, and then there's like a futon mattress in the back. So the van is. We try to keep it clean, but obviously it can descend into a disgusting shithole like relatively quickly.
They all do.
So just please don't put your shoes directly on the bed. Like you wouldn't trample all over your own bed.
Yes.
Plus you're like walking through venues and gross bathrooms or wherever, loading through the mud. Like just if you want to go down there, just take your shoes off.
The minute you walk into a venue, no matter if they just cleaned it, it immediately smells like old beer and fucked up shit.
Right,
like,
exactly.
And that's just going right into the futon.
Yeah, that's just, and that's a hard stink to get out.
Yeah, it is.
So that's really my only 2.
Who controls the music?
Whoever's driving.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you're cruising, try to be respectful, right?
Yeah.
Again, if everyone's up and awake and feeling it,
right.
Blast the tunes from
Japanese harsh noise nonstop.
Exactly. But if you're gonna be, if you're doing a night shift, don't be cranking music in the back.
Yeah.
Just put it up front and try not to be like blasting it and singing along.
Yep.
Please. We don't really do. With some people prefer it. In our team, I don't actually need a wingman while I'm driving. My thought is like. We all work so hard and we're like all up constantly. Like get sleep when you can get it. I mean, some bands like have like you need to have another person up with you at all times, which is probably the safest way to do it. But it's also like I think maybe an easier way to like burn one extra guy on your team out. I mean, for us, it's like we have like a don't be a hero rule. Like if you're really fading, like know yourself. Know like when your like eyes are getting heavy. Pull off, grab a coffee, take an hour nap, and set an alarm. Or, like, if you're just, like, so shot, like, wake somebody up and, like, see if they'll take your shift. That's, like, a huge, like, last resort kind of thing. But if it's, like, if the drive needs to happen and we've got, like, 15 hours to get to the gig and we're either going to miss the show or someone else is going to suck it up, like, do it. We're definitely going to
I think that was the problem and the plus in my band Orchid is that guitarist Will is the only one who would drive.
Oh, wow.
Like, he was just, like, kind of like I am the only one that can, and it just kind of was never questioned until just one time when like we watched him falling asleep at the wheel, and it was just like literally out of like multiple like so many tours of just like that was the only time he's ever switched. But then as I started going in Panthers and I became Will, like I think I just became like I'll just drive everything. It didn't help that I'm the only sober one in the band too, so it's like there's always that, but I think I started also getting a stress of I don't want this van to flip. I don't trust anyone else.
Right.
I've been in this tour too long. I got to get out. With that though, I always needed a wingman, but I get that too. Like it's like I needed someone to work with me because I was becoming a control freak against my own wishes. Speaking of vans, like kind of go back to like the beginning of the band. Like, what was the scene like originally? Like, when you're kind of starting off, like, because you're from Boston originally, right? Like, what was the kind of like the DIY metal scene there? Because like I know from, the kind of punk and hardcore world in like '96, and like basement shows in JP, and the Harvard Co-op. Like where I'd see a bunch of shows, but like and then there would be the crossover, like Grief. Like we would play with Grief, and like they would maybe play, I would assume, like kind of more metal shows as well. And then like Nuth Grush would be kind of like in there. But like, what was that world like?
It was awesome. Mm-hmm. I had a great time in the Boston scene. A lot of I feel like you're one of the few interviewers that asked me about that more, like gets that more underground punk DIY stuff.
Right.
I feel like everyone always asks me like, oh, so yeah, you grew up with like Shadows Fall and All That Remains and Killswitch. And
I mean, that's the thing. Like, it's like, yeah, I played with Shadows Fall when their demo came out.
Yeah, we never
like, you know, it's like, oh, it's in, and then all of a sudden I was like, oh, Brian from Overcast is singing because I grew up with fucking Overcast.
Right. That was more of a Western Mass scene, and they were also, I don't know, a half generation or so older than us.
Which is a big thing that comes up on this lot. That's just like, especially I think in underground stuff, like it can be 1 year gap and it's a completely different world.
For sure.
Like you got into hardcore in 95 versus 96. It's like you completely different bands, completely different scene, completely different venues you're going to. And it can be such a, in Western, especially then too when there were scenes, like you were saying, like there were legitimate scenes. Western Mass was Western Mass.
Right.
That was such a big thing at one point.
I think for so many people though, when they think about, you know, people that aren't from Massachusetts, they just think, oh, Boston, right?
Yeah.
And so many of those bands were, you know, Boston bands, even though the scene was an hour and a half, 2 hours away.
Right.
So yeah, we came up in the metal scene, but also in the punk scene. We kind of just played wherever would have us. We would be doing club shows and bar shows with death and thrash metal bands at clubs like or bars like O'Brien's, Great Scott, the Middle East out in Cambridge, which is part of Boston, basically. I mean, it's technically not, but it's so close.
It's Boston, in my mind.
Yeah, it's the metro area,
right?
And then we would be doing punk rock basement shows or weird warehouses that months later someone burned down with fireworks and stuff like that. And but it was a really great time to be a musician. We were being exposed to so many different bands and so many different scenes, and it really felt like a camaraderie. Seeing the same dudes at shows, and you see them at parties or out here and there, and we just developed this nice community of people that I'm still close with to this day. It was also interesting playing with different bands from different genres because you're like, all right, cool. Like obviously, like metal has one aesthetic. But I learned a lot from punk rock too, just in terms of like the raw energy, the pissed off in your face. Like it's not as technical, but there's that raw element to it that I think we tried to bring into our live show, and our overall just kind of vibe, and also the DIY nature of punk rock. It's like, oh yeah, like these dudes are just like getting in a van and like going for it. Like hell yeah, let's do that. We don't need like to be in a bus or like whatever. We can just go out and do it ourselves.
That's what, like, it always, like when I would talk to just like back in the day, even like just straight metal bands who didn't understand. That's like, oh, you don't have to. You're still kind of thinking in that pay to play mode. Like why wouldn't you just book a tour? Like it can be done.
Especially with the internet and stuff like that. I mean, back when MySpace was still a thing, we just kind of hit up local bands, local promoters, local bars, even like, hey, here's our thing. And I mean, did the shows turn out great? Like, no, but you kind of have to, like, those are your years to kind of grind it out and see if anyone cares. And at the very least, it's like a bunch of memories and ammunition later on down the line when you're sort of soliciting yourself to labels. Like, hey, like, because that's the number one thing they're going to ask after, like, is your music any good? Is like, oh, do you tour? Can you go out there and hit the road? Can you, like, if we're going to put up money to record this record, are we going to see a return on our investment of you guys, like, going out there and, like, putting bodies in the room and selling T-shirts, CDs, whatever. Yeah. So.
Did you ever play, like, now I'm just wanting to know, like, were there shows when you were kind of growing, like coming up, were there shows still going on at Harvard Co-op at all, or at or in JP? Like that's where mainly the house shows were. Where there's like one had like Krusty Craig. Was
I know Craig.
Yeah, like Craig's house is like where like Orchid play, and like I think my band These Last Days play. Like
I can't say for sure as far as if Harvard Co-op is still a thing. I'm not sure. It might be, or maybe it's changed hands or changed names. For me, a lot of the basement shows that we played and I went to were in Allston because I was in Brighton. So it was just like closer by, and it was a great network.
Because we also had a punk house in Allston,
right
behind Star Market.
Now, do you know
the
Jonah
Rotting Stuff House
from Ranting Speed, Teenage Disco Bloodbath back in the day?
No.
He had a house on, I want to say like Pratt Street or something like that. And they would do basement shows. I remember seeing like Animosity play there, and like it was crazy. They ripped it too.
I'm sure.
Yeah, back this was many years ago. There was like some kind of weird barbecue, bunch of bands playing, but they were one of the bands that really stuck out to me.
Did you play at the Space in Worcester? That was another venue. Now it's just like thinking of like in Massachusetts, like we went to Brockton and we played.
Right. No, I think there's so many.
And Brockton was one of the most fucked up shows I've ever played.
I bet, yeah.
It was like this
hardcore
band
shows.
Punch the Clown.
Never
Played.
heard of it, yeah.
You shouldn't have.
Yeah.
But like legitimately, like it was like one of my second band or something. But it was like it was like a bunch of practice spaces.
Right.
And then like Ground Zero was this Connecticut band that we grew up with, and then this band and Punch the Clown. But I remember distinctly, Punch the Clown had 2 singers.
Okay.
And a girl started trying to give a hand job to one of the singers like during the set. And he had to keep being like, no, baby. And you could hear him going, no, baby, into the mic. And they were just like the worst, thuggiest, hardcore. And I'm also, Punch the Clown, please, I hope, I love you.
Right.
Don't beat me up if you hear me. Yeah, she wanted to get right up in that clown and punch the hell out of it. But it was just the most, I remember just standing there, just like, where the fuck am I?
Right.
What is going on in Brockton, Mass? Which is a question people are still asking to this day.
Probably, yeah.
But that was when you start to expand of like, maybe I'll go to other places in Massachusetts as well.
It's one of those things where I kind of feel like the underground scene is like a hydra, right? Like
Right.
one head will get cut off
because
the cops blow it up or
Right.
whatever, and then like 2 more will pop up. So,
because I also had once I got into my band Orchid, like the Northampton Amherst area was its own scene.
Right.
And there were just so many bands and
Yep.
so many shows there
Yeah,
with Pearl Street as well as all of the DIY venues there, which was amazing. Like that, you're just like, this is a weird college town.
Right.
There is nothing going on here except for all these bands for some reason.
It's great. I mean, all it takes is for a new set of college kids to move in
Right.
with a love for punk or metal and like I don't give a shit kind of
Yeah.
attitude, and like it's not my house.
Right, that's as long as it's not my house. I was happy most of the shows at my punk house happened when I had left already.
And I think even for them too, like I mean, yeah, they live there, but it's like it's not a house that they own either.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like they're
Yeah.
renting or whatever. It's
Right.
like, okay, we don't get our security deposit back. It's
Right.
like, someone
Exactly.
punched a hole in the wall, but whatever. Like we're just kind of flying by the seat of our pants, and we're gonna figure it out. So yeah, I mean, I've been to so many shows that have been broken up by cops, and then like it's like, all right, just be quiet.
Yep.
They'll leave in 5 minutes. And then like the show's back on,
Yeah.
and of course someone calls the cops again, and then it's like, okay, like the jig is up, like we're out of here.
Right.
But yeah, like there was Unit 11 that was like a practice space that was doing shows. There was Castle Grayskull on Greylock Street that we played at.
Oh, I remember that. I
Yep.
actually do remember that venue.
Yeah.
What were the main bands you would play with in that kind of time?
So like Despotic Robot, they turned into Ramming Speed.
Okay.
Man, there was just like so many bands. I'm trying to think of like bands we played like from across the basement scene
Right.
as well as like the
Right,
bar and club scene.
Right.
Random Acts of Violence.
Okay.
That was a band that we really looked up to. They were from Quincy, and I think really helped us form our sound.
Right.
I remember being a kid and like just watching them. They weren't playing big stages. I mean, they were playing the same shows that we were,
Right.
but like they just had like the stage banter dialed in. They just like seemed cool, and they fucking delivered the goods live
Right.
so hard, and had really interesting music like to boot.
Yeah.
So I became like instantly a fan of that band. Like really looked up to them, and ended up befriending
Sure.
the dudes. Sextrament was like a band like that was more on the death metal side of things. They were like that slam kind of gore groove. I'm still
Right.
I'm still tight with all those guys. They've since disbanded, but they were major sort of players in the Boston scene. Anytime we'd have like after going on tour, we'd have like a hometown show or whatever. Like
Right.
we'd always try to get Sextrament on the show. Razor Maves was another. They were like just like a thrash band,
Right.
kind of old school. So many bands.
Sure.
I've seen, yeah.
Moving now forward, so you obviously play in Revocation, but also like you teach guitar. Obviously, it's also again like it's as a fellow teacher. I make my living teaching comedy, sketch comedy. What is the worst part of being that job?
A teacher?
Yeah.
I mean, I really do love to teach.
Do you have days where you're just like, God, I'm sick of my guitar? Like, do you have just days like, it's just like, I love this and hate it so much at the same time?
Luckily, no. I mean, I just always enjoy playing guitar. I think maybe like sometimes like you can just get like mentally fatigued if you've got like a long day of teaching because you have to be so kind of focused on things, and also just like hearing guitar, not only you're playing but like listening to someone else's playing. It can be kind of like taxing on your ears. I mean, for me, some like the worst things are like. Although it can be sometimes blessings in disguise if you've got like a busy day or like if But like if someone like cancels on you like last minute,
Right.
that's just like annoying because you're like, oh god damn it, you know.
Right.
I mean, I get that like things come up, but like
Sure.
just like sort of like.
But you're scheduling all around that.
Right, exactly. And if
Right.
it's like 1 hour, like let's say like you've got. It's like a slow day, and there's like one lesson like right in the middle of your
Right.
day, and that's it. And then someone cancels that. You're like,
Right.
fuck, I could have gone to the beach today or whatever.
Sure, exactly.
I plan my whole day around this.
Right.
So that can be like a little bit frustrating, but for the most part, I think I'm really lucky to teach and do what I love, and it's so rewarding when I get to see that light bulb go off over students' heads. Right. I guess one other thing that's frustrating sometimes is when people don't practice, right?
Yep.
Because then it's like, okay, like I'm happy to go over this again, but I mean, selfishly for me, I want to move forward because I want to talk about
Sure.
cooler stuff because
Sure.
then we can kind of like link up with like things that are more exciting to me. Like I don't need to learn the notes
Right.
on my fretboard
Right.
anymore, but
Right.
but you do. But that's
Right.
like lesson number 1. Like let's not do this.
That's
for 5 lessons. you
Yeah.
know?
As a writing teacher, that's one of the more frustrating things are those moments when it's just like, you just didn't do the work. And I'm like, why'd you waste the money?
Right.
Like, I'm going to be here, and I have to read whatever you bring in.
Right.
But also when they tell, like, a sketch is fine, and then they're like, I mean, I wrote it like an hour before I came here. And I'm just like, okay, I still have to kind of go through the motions.
Right.
Like, I'm doing the work. Like,
Right.
no matter how many, I'm sure in some ways it's equally as right, where you're just like, you're only going to get to that next level if you do the repetitions.
Right,
Like,
right.
I always use guitar as like you're only going to understand how to write a fucking sketch if you've written a buttload of them, and eventually you're not thinking about why your fingers are going to this part.
Right.
You just have that mental, not like you, and so then you can go to the next thing that you want to work on. Do you ever also, this is, basically I'm just asking versions of what I get frustrated with, see if you have it with guitar teaching as well. Do you get frustrated with people who are like kind of like up at all of like either above the, or think they're above the level they really are at that point?
It's weird. Again, I think I've been lucky. Like, I've had a lot of great students over the years, and like the current students that I'm teaching are really great. I mean, the way I look at it is like obviously, some people want guitar lessons because they're not looking to be the best guitar player
Right.
in the world.
Right.
They just want to get like a little bit better, right?
Right.
Or write songs or learn riffs or whatever.
Right.
So it's like I think everyone, you can't base your outlook off of like what I'm trying to get out of music,
Right.
because some dudes have like an 80-hour work week, or they got
Yeah.
kids, or this or that. There's all these things that are competing for their.
I think I can
for
work
their
with
time.
that style of student
Right.
better, because it's just like, oh, you're doing this for either fun or you're aware of your limitations.
Right.
Like, I can sometimes get frustrated as a teacher in writing where it's like, what's your end goal? I want to write for SNL. Okay. What have you done?
Right.
I wrote like 4 sketches and I haven't done half of the ones you assigned.
Right.
I'm like, well, I mean, I can think of one way to get to SNL, literally the exact opposite of what you're doing to me.
Right.
And it can be very hard when I'm like, every once in a while I'll tell them, like, and maybe you can feel this way with riffs too, where I'm just like, I've done the math. I've read 15,000 sketches, like, just of yours, not
Right.
of my own.
Right.
So I've kind of seen, like, all the variations.
Right.
And so it's like, those are moments where I'm like, don't bullshit a bullshitter.
Right.
Like, if you really want to do this, let's do this. But I personally like the student that's just like, I just want to do this for fun. I think this is like, they're aware of what they can do.
Right. Yeah, no one comes in like vibing me out like I'm
Right.
gonna show you a thing or two.
Right.
Like, and it's cool because I teach some students that are at a really high level, and I've gotten some students that were just straight up like beginners, like didn't really know
Right.
much, to a level over the course of a couple years where like we can work on like really kind of heady stuff, or like work on transcriptions of other people's solos, and they really get it. So that's where it's really rewarding for me. Where it's like, wow, I took someone that was either really sick and like hopefully like gave them some new things to think about, or took someone from a sort of almost beginner intermediate level and got them to the point where like they're getting particularly advanced.
Right.
So it's great when I see that happen. It really just sort of inspires me to just want to become the best teacher that I can be. And
Right.
I think, when you do it so many times, like you said, you read like 15,000 sketches, like you learn a lot about your own craft, I think, by teaching others.
I agree.
So that again, for me, is sort of selfishly why I like to.
Because I can
teach.
easily point out things that I actually do poorly.
Right, yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
Like, where I'm just like, I'm always like, I make this mistake as well.
Right.
But I'm objective. Like, I have no... it doesn't matter to me if the sketch works not in a negative way.
Sometimes for me, it'll be like a student that'll ask a question that maybe I hadn't thought of before, or
Right.
sort of, or maybe something's not clicking one way, so I have to figure out a new way to explain it. And then in doing that, I learn something in the
Being
process.
stumped is kind of nice
Right,
sometimes,
right.
because it's
You're
like,
like,
it
oh,
doesn't...
okay.
If they're doing it to be a jerk, but that doesn't happen often. It's just like, oh, I will give you an answer.
Right.
I will work on it and figure it out.
Right.
So it makes me realize there's kind of like limitations. But it's like, if someone's coming in like, I want to be Al Di Meola, and you only know like kind of some basic notes.
Right.
It's like, well, you got to do the work, man. I would love to be Al Di Meola too, but I'm just not there yet.
Yeah, I've never got. I don't think I've gotten any way. I mean, maybe they were trying to vibe me out, but I wasn't picking up on it. But I don't think I've ever really gotten any like, just dudes coming in that were really trying to.
It could be. Those are the times where I'm like, am I crazy, or is this just like a vibe? But it's like in comedy, there are just people who are just like, are you coming in just to like try to catch me or something?
Right,
like
right.
you're trying to like prove that I don't know what I'm talking about.
Right.
What a weird way to come at these classes. And I'll verify with other teachers. Like, you're not crazy. People do that.
Yeah, that's.
And I'm like, yeah, there's just a lot of people that come in and people are crazy.
Right.
But such is the way.
Yep.
Do you end up, like, is that even, like, do you kind of find times of, like, teaching that kind of brings to, like, oh, actually this will kind of translate into a new way to think about writing a song for...
So, yeah, sometimes, or at least, like, maybe general concepts that kind of stick with me
Right.
after the fact.
Right.
I mean, I've had examples where I've been, like, teaching a lesson, and I've like, come up with, like, a riff, like, oh, yeah, like, this is this scale, like, here's what it sounds like. And, like, 9 times out of 10, like, I don't, like, record it after the fact. I'll
Sure.
just forget it. But I'm like, oh, that was actually kind of a sick riff. And
Right.
I'm like, oh, you might actually, like, I should be paying you. Like,
Right.
I just wrote a cool riff.
Right.
So, yeah, but I think it's more like a general kind of, like, concept kind of thing. Like, when I'm going through something, like, okay, here's how we can connect these arpeggios, and I'm trying not to just, like, teach the same thing with the same student.
Right.
So it'll always be something different, and then, yeah, you'll stumble upon, like, kind of cool things. And I think it's fun that way because you can see the response of the student. Like,
Right.
you kind of see them light up, like, whoa, that was actually really cool.
Right.
I'm like, I know, right? That was cool.
Right.
Like,
Those are the nicest moments
Right,
when it's
right.
just like, I didn't think of that, and I'm like, that's why we're here. We're
Right.
working together.
Right,
Like,
exactly.
if you're sitting staring at a screen, you're not going to come up with a great joke 9 times out of 10.
Right.
When you're trying to just think about now, you're kind of writing all the time. Do you have kind of go-tos for, like, I'm starting to feel a little stuck, because that's part of being in a band, is just feeling like I've hit a wall.
Right.
I just don't know what to write anymore. Like, no matter how, many riffs you come up with, do you have any kind of go-tos for, like, kind of inspiration for it?
For me, it's if I'm not feeling inspired, I'm not trying to force it.
Right.
I find that, I mean, at this point, with our new record coming out, I think it's our 7th full length, not counting a 5-song EP that we've done. So
Right.
we've got, like, a lot of material.
Sure.
And almost 100 songs at this point. So it's
Right.
like, when I was a kid, I was just writing, like, constantly. Now I've sort of slowed down a lot in my writing, sort of in favor of working on other concepts or techniques more,
Right.
rather than just feeling like I have to, like, write.
Right.
But yeah, if I'm not feeling it, I'm not going to try to force anything.
Right.
I don't want to sit there for, like, 5 hours and, like, nothing's coming out. I would rather just spend that time, like, working on, like, someone else's, like, a transcription of someone else's
Sure.
music, and then gaining inspiration for that. For me, I had this sort of love of jazz instilled at a younger age. Like, I went to an arts high school, so I was in the big band. I was, like, texting with my old guitar teacher earlier today. Like, I'm still, like, really close friends with
Right.
him, and we hang out and play guitar, have a beer, or whatever. So he made a big impact on me in terms of sort of thinking outside the box, like, because he, like so many guitar players, I think, very few of us, I think, come to, like, we don't really start with jazz, I don't think. I think it's more like he's got, like, the old VHSs of, like, Paul Gilbert shred
Right.
in 101 or whatever, like
Right.
at his house too,
Yeah.
and like old Megadeth videos. But eventually along the way, like you either kind of get exposed to it and you dig it, or you never get exposed to it, or you do but you just don't understand it,
Yeah.
or like no one's, because with jazz I think you kind of need someone to kind of hold your hand through it a little bit.
Yeah.
It's like I've heard it described when someone was talking about Cecil Taylor, who's like a crazy avant-garde piano player.
Yep.
They were talking about his music and how people didn't get it at the time, and they were like, you can't just like read James Joyce or like Shakespeare without like having someone sort of explain why it's important, or like why it mattered at the time, and why it still matters, and all this stuff. So that's sort of like headier forms of art, jazz in particular, because you kind of have to understand sort of the history,
The language of it.
the
But,
language of it. Yeah,
So
there's-
weirdly just make it seem like that it's not all the same.
Right.
Because it is just like I can understand when people are like, it all sounds the same. And I'm like, I get it.
Right. Well, for some people, metal all sounds the
Yeah,
same.
exactly.
So-
That's why I'm like, all hardcore stuff. Like my
Right.
wife, every hardcore band, I was listening to Chokehold and the Grill Biscuits, and she was just like, "This is the same band." I was like, "It's crazy to me that you thought they were the same."
Right.
And then I thought about it. I was like, "Yeah, it's not that crazy."
Right. Yeah, fast drums and
Right.
distorted riffs and
Right.
screaming. But yeah, so for me, like what I mainly listen to when I'm home is like either like classical or jazz. So I mean, I get so much metal when I'm on tour. I still, of course, listen to metal, especially like any new releases that really catch my ear.
Sure.
A lot of it for me is nostalgia, I think, because it's such a powerful thing. So I'll go back to old records, whether they're
Right.
death metal records or thrash, or I mean even like the classics that got me into metal in the first
Yeah.
place.
But the moment I realized right out of college that Yes was basically metal, like, and then I sat down, like, that was like that moment where it was like literally like the week I graduated college. Then all of a sudden I was just like, oh, this is everything that's going to be what I listen to now.
Right.
Like, just all of a sudden I was just like, oh yeah, even though I love metal so much and listen to it, kind of semi-nonstop, but most of the time it's also fucking prog fusion
Right.
and new age music.
Right.
Like, just because it is, like, it's also because I think it gets so ingrained in your bones, metal anyway. Like, you almost don't need to. You need the other avenues. You need, like...
It's a palate cleanser, and it's also just, I think, a different way of thinking about music. As a player, obviously, it's super challenging, and if I'm working on a transcription, especially of an instrument that's not guitar, it's like,
Right.
oh, I'm going to learn, like, a portion of this like Chick Corea solo, or
Yep.
a portion of this John Coltrane solo, or of this Joe Henderson solo. It's like, well, never played that combination of
Yep.
notes before because it wasn't meant to be played on
Yeah.
guitar. So that's challenging just in terms of like seeing different phrases and hearing things in different ways. So I find that because I'm kind of maybe bouncing back and forth between both worlds, I'm kind of always constantly being inspired because I don't let myself live too long in one particular
Right.
sound or genre, and I think that lets me appreciate things a bit more. I mean, there's some people that eat, sleep, and breathe death metal 24/7, and
Right.
that's totally awesome. For me, and I was that guy for the longest time
Sure.
too. Growing up, I mean, it was like all I would listen to. I remember just putting the headphones on, going to sleep,
Right.
listening to like my favorite records, like had CDs, and go on the bus and like
Yep.
and I would listen to like one CD for like days in a row,
Right.
right? Nowadays you can barely get someone to listen to one song all the way through.
I know.
But it would be like, oh, cool. And I would even like, it would be weird, like, I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but like certain seasons, or if it was like a snowy day, I'd be like, oh, I'm gonna listen to Arch Enemy today or whatever.
100%.
Like, I was so in tune with like how different vibes of records made me feel and what it was like, just the weather outside. So I totally understand that unabashed love of like one particular genre, but I
Right.
guess just as I've gotten older and as it's really become my career of just like going on tour and like you're gonna see 4 hours of death metal or thrash or whatever like every night for 30
Right.
days straight, you get to the band and you come back home and you're like, all right, maybe I don't even feel like listening to any music
Yeah.
at all, or if I'm gonna listen to something, it's gonna be like John Coltrane or like this like classical piece. Like I want to hear like string music that's not distorted guitar. I want to hear like a cello or a viola.
There's
or
nothing
violin.
more amazing than realizing there was a record from like 1972 that might speak to you more than something from 2018.
Right.
And also somehow has all the elements you were looking for anyways. Genesis, I love you. Top 5 bands all time. So on that note, this was great. I'm so glad you didn't die multiple times.
Thank you.
from multiple types of pneumonia and sickness. The last question we always ask, what do you think of the word gig?
I like it.
Good. That's all we need. As long as you like it, I'm glad.
People hate it?
Yeah.
Really?
It's again, I've been for
I mean, that's a jazz thing, though. It's like you always say, like, oh, yeah, I got a gig.
Well, there you go. It depends on who it is.
Right.
Like, it was like when I would talk to comedians, if it was paid, it seemed to be a gig. If a musician was from punk and hardcore, it was always a show. If born and raised, nothing but metal, gigs seem fine. Some people don't give a fuck. Some people really have violent reactions. Some people think it's Guitar Center. And this is, I like it.
It's good.
I'm glad with that. I love that answer, too. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you, man.
That was great.